far, sleep spots of pollution, closing our eyes, blinding to tell, hoping the mama does not see us now. An American massacre. In Southern California, we're reasoning with messengers who sit and talk about the weather. Deep, oh deep, for a moment I couldn't see thee disappear through the glass, but never fear. I was the last to know as the pain had dried on the pavement, and now I'm waiting for anyone at all. You had the wrong idea, although the birds they once called your name, and if they called mine too, I didn't hear them. Forget the Broad Street line. It still runs, but what for? Making in the city light. You stood abused, mistaken, more than just a little bit bored, and I will be with you as you shuffle your innocent way to the floor. So dance for no reason at all. For it seems we're still the passengers, still the keys for your customers, and the city's still ripped back sides. We will do what we need to keep this fantasy alive. Parking lot in the rain was where you said you never changed, but I fell in love with you, and now I cannot move. Cheap Italian wine, a cheaper life for parody. I see your point of view, but all I really wanted to do was stay alone. Take my hand again, please, darling. My daughter says, but Daddy, am I pretty now? Yeah, we were so close, could almost touch the sun, but we burned ourselves out. Still working on your short story, like Simon's human trampoline. You're wearing all of New York City's complaints. Was that a shot fired in the distance? Was that a knock with his mumbled words yours? How can I be sure when I am not behind the door? I don't live there anymore.
Hi. Welcome to everybody watching right now. I'm sorry, I have three streams going and I got a little myth for a second. But I am really excited to invite you into this conversation on the making of New Fragility. I think it's a remarkable and outstanding album, and we're really lucky to have the team who is involved behind the scenes and in front of the mic here to talk about the guts and the soul and the spirit of this album. Maybe we can start with some introductions around the screen. Alec, if you'd like to go first.
Sure thing. Um, I'm Alec. I um, made this record with all of the guys that you see. I'm in Philadelphia. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I've been working at Clap Your Hands for Clap Your Hands Say Yeah for about 16, 17 years now. And this is the last album. I don't know. There you go.
That's perfect. Yeah, anybody is welcome to jump in.
Okay, yeah, Britton, go ahead.
My name is Britton Beisenherz. Excuse me. I own and operate Ramble Creek Recording in Austin, Texas, where the bulk of New Fragility was recorded, and played a bunch of the bass parts as well on the record.
John, if you'd like to go.
Hey, everybody, I'm John Agnello. I mixed the record for the guys at Kaleidoscope Sound in Union City, New Jersey, with Jeremy Delaney, my mix assistant engineer. And yeah, I'm just happy to have been involved.
Fantastic. Will, and then we can go to Bob.
Will's frozen.
So we can jump to Bob and then
Okay.
go back to Will.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Bob Andrews. I manage Clap Your Hands Say Yeah, and I also manage Will Johnson, and that's kind of how that happened there. And I've known John forever. John and I go back a long time, and I've known Britton forever. We go back for a long time too. So, and Will and Britton work together a lot at the studio there in Austin. They've made a couple records together, a few records together over the last few years. So, yeah, there you go. And I'm in Champaign, Illinois, the greatest city in North America besides Toronto. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I forgot to say off the top, I'm Melissa, and I'm a writer, editor type based in Toronto. Hopefully, will unfreeze shortly, but
Okay.
maybe while we wait on that, I mean, I think what's really remarkable about this project is that it seems like there's a lot of pre-existing creative intimacy sort of within this group. And yeah, I mean, Alec, I think I'd love to hear from you. How would you describe this sort of initial inception of Clap Your Hands Say Yeah into the way that it's evolved over the years and led you to this current album?
I don't know if I've given it too much thought. I think it's album to album for me, and I thought this batch of songs would suit Will and Britton down in Austin pretty well, and John. So I mean, like, I mean, obviously everybody's pretty versatile that I work with, including all these guys, and but I try to, as best I can, to play to people's strengths, and I feel like all of these guys were lined up with a certain amount of intention, you know. But it's album to album, you know. Some albums I've worked with a guy named Dave Fridman on several records up in New York, and I thought that Dave was suitable for, you know, X, Y, or Z record, and you know, it sort of depends. But I kind of go with whatever has been presented to me, you know, creatively. Which is kind of like out of my control to a degree, you know?
Yeah, I'm curious from those really like early renderings of what you wanted the album to sound like and what you wanted it to accomplish. Like, what were some of those skills? What were some of those sounds? Like, what were some of those missing ingredients that you were looking to fill in order to really just
I really lucked out to get these guys on board. Really, I mean, like for this batch of songs in particular, I made a record in New Orleans called Beauty back in 2009, and I thought something that's like that was like song based, but this is maybe a little bit more informed by virtue of having done this for a little longer. And I wanted to work with guys who had, all due respect, but like veteran status, like we know carve out a song and and like like try to like simplify and focus on the substance beneath it all rather than get it cute. I liked that about everybody's work on the board here. So like it goes direct to the heart of it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Will, it looks like we may or may not, we may have you back. You maybe want to say hello. Or,
Uh, I don't know. I might not be working out at the moment.
yeah, that's
Will
right.
and I are texting back and forth. He's going to disconnect and try to reconnect and see if that helps. So
Okay,
sorry about that, everybody.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess for everyone else, like when you sort of were first connected to the project, what were your first impressions of it, and what did you kind of envision as what you would bring to the final product? Maybe John, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. The first thing was when my managers contacted me and said, clap your hands, say you want to, I was like, wow, that's great. I was really excited because I'd been a fan, for a length of the time that, Alec had been making records. And I thought that was really fun. I really was excited. But, then understand he brings me the tracks. They were pretty fresh when I listened to them. And when I opened up each song, there was such a diversity, and B, just orchestrational and the soaring vocals. It just really, every time I opened up a song, it was like, wow, it's epic, in scope and feel. So for me, it was really just fun digging into the songs. And Alec was very, he hung with, we did it together, he was there the whole time, and I just was able to try all kinds of things, and he was always like positive about it. It was always like, have fun. And they brought me the tracks that sounded fantastic from the get-go. I mean, it was exceptional before it got to me, which made my life way easier. I didn't have to fix anything. It was just, I just opened the songs up and just had fun and tried to make them as lush or as dry, song by song, given what was appropriate. So yeah, no, it was really fantastic. I have a funny thing with this record because there were a lot of working titles. And then when the record came out, now there are different names. So I still refer to the working titles, but I guess it's Thousand Oaks still gives me chills whenever I listen to it. I literally chicken skin, just from the song and from the vocals. So no, I hope I answered your question, but it was really amazing just, for the 8 or 10 days that we worked together on it.
Well, I appreciate you bringing up the subject of titling, and I'm curious to hear, I mean, given the time that went into the naming of the album from its initial conception into now, and it's pulled from a David Foster Wallace short story. Alec, does the title New Fragility mean something different to you now than it did when you first came up with it? And does it feel like a term that's kind of fixed or something that's always evolving?
That was a curve at the end. I think I think it's to answer the second part first. I think it's always evolving. David Foster Wallace used it in regards to like somebody approaching puberty and the idea of entering a new fragility. I liked that suggestion. I mean, and I borrowed it, and I think for me, yeah, it is kind of evolving every stage of your life, and especially with what you're dealt. I think I wrote this under a certain duress that we were all feeling around the Trump administration. Well, a lot of us were feeling, and I think for me, I had a reaction to the fact that people. I don't like it when people have a sense of entitlement or a sense of if they are a little foolhardy, or a little. I mean, like, I don't like it when people try to act strong and don't admit that they can be weak. It's a problem for me. Or that they can make mistakes. I appreciate confidence, but I don't like cockiness. And for me, like you, that's something to embrace. And I think on this record, I was lucky to come upon the title, but I kind of name everything after the fact, almost in reaction to what's been written or how everything looks together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love that framing because
I don't know if I.
Oh, no, you answered
I
that. Well, I'm sorry for throwing a curve at you, but I think, that the album does deal in a really potent kind of intimacy, and there are a lot of things that are made really clear and vivid. But then I also think that, there needs to be a level of confidence to be able to share that. And I wonder if that ability to sort of be vulnerable within the creative process was something that was present in the recording room for Will and Britton.
I would guess. I don't know. I mean, they can speak to this maybe better than I can. But I would like to imagine that I don't know. It's like you write a song and you're in a certain frame of mind, and then you execute it in somewhat different. It's kind of. I don't want to say it's business or anything like that, but it's a little bit business.
Yeah. Well, what's your creative process like in terms of the things that are just like stable and kind of sturdy across all of the releases and across your discography?
I don't know if there's much that's stable about it. I mean, I don't even start on the same instrument a lot of the time, so I don't know. I mean, like and oftentimes, as the years go on, I seem to throw out more than I keep. So, yeah, I don't know. There's not much stability on this end at the moment. You're asking me on a bad day.
No, I mean, I think that so much of putting something out into the world is like seeing how it manifests through a bunch of new eyes. And it's like, in the same way, I think this idea of like a puberty and like an adolescence, it is something that like each new listener sort of experiences.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. You're kind of opening yourself up, whether you like it or not. And whatever you do, if you put it out there, it doesn't even, you're opening yourself up and you're putting yourself out for everybody to witness to a degree. So yeah, you need to be kind of confident and not afraid of that. But
when this admission that it's true, I had to get used to this really early on. I think we started with Mirror Song, and which wasn't called Mirror Song, I don't think at the time. And Alec went and sat down at the piano, and we tracked a killer performance all the way through, and he promptly got up and said, well, that'll do for now. I can, I'll do it again in a little while better. And I thought, wow, I'm not sure that we need it to be better. And that was kind of a theme kind of throughout the weeks of working on the record. He's so proficient, and kind of the ideas are kind of gelling as we go. And so maybe it's a great performance, but it's not necessarily the right performance, and it gets thrown out and redone maybe 2, maybe 3 times, maybe on different instruments. So there isn't a preciousness about the performances. each on their own, it kind of culminates into something greater than the sum of its parts by virtue of redoing and rethinking, and that's kind of part of the process of making this record, I think.
Yeah, I will say that it was like, to speak to Britton's point, like it was amazingly like way easier, because I am like prone to a lot of doubt, as are many creative people. Um, and especially when it gets down to the studio, because it's like, now you got to do it, it's got to be done, and it's got to be done here. But with Britton and Will, I gotta say, it was I mean, maybe it happened that I had done these songs already like a lot before I got there, so I was better at them than I thought. But just to have these guys kind of have my back in the studio was super helpful. You don't always get that in every setting. Will, you should introduce
Hi.
yourself.
I will.
Hi.
Um,
I'm on Fisher Price internet over here.
well, we did a round of intros off the top. If you want to say hello and how you're connected to the project, that would be great.
Oh, I did my intro. You guys just didn't hear it. I can't do it again. I couldn't possibly repeat it. I'm kidding. I was just joking. My name's Will. I'm down here in Austin, Texas, and it is a true joy to be a part of this recording. I've known Alec for a number of years and been a fan of the music and the records going back, good grief, 15 years at this point, at least. But as I mentioned earlier, I guess I was sitting in a room talking to myself for that moment, but we were kind of ships in the night. We would see each other at various festivals and shows and things like that around. And but to be called off the bench to do some drumming and co-producing and a little, just whatever I was useful for around the studio meant and continues to mean a lot. So to be a part of this is a big deal. And a little background with Britton and I, we've worked on records, various projects, mine and many others, going back to 2007 at this point. So we have a lot of good hours behind us at Ramble Creek, to where I think, even though if Alec, with the scenario of him coming all the way down and maybe not knowing either of us that well, there was a feeling of comfort knowing his level of musicianship and songwriting coming into the way that Britton and I have learned to work over the last 15 years or so, to where it didn't feel too terribly intimidating. It was just the right amount of nervousness mixed with excitement coming into this record. And we also didn't make a long series of days or weeks of making this. We had a limited amount of time, which I think kept us focused and kept us very much in the moment, kind of riding on what we knew Alec already wanted, but also a little bit of living in the moment. So hopefully the record represents both of those energies.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, Alec, I'm curious to hear from you. Like, what was that curating process like, as you as the pieces started to come together, and then you were starting to decide what would make its way onto the album, especially considering some tracks have just been gestating for a really long time. Yeah, that kind of comes.
I don't know, because as Will said, we did have a kind of limited amount of time, and I don't know if I brought them too much. It was fairly focused already on a certain amount of songs. I think we only had we didn't go over too much, but I mean, like pretty early on, I could tell if we all three of us kind of felt a connection to something and it was going in the right direction. It's just like all the songs kind of fit. The ones that didn't make it, just like an order of album sequence, I didn't find it like working for me, personal preference. But I will say, like, again, one of the reasons that I was a little, I gotta say, like, I knew Will's stuff, I knew Britton's stuff not quite as well, but I studied up on it before I went down, and I was hopeful that it would be like a kind of a unified voice as a result. But I'm a born kind of pessimist, unfortunately. So I'm I'm hopeful, but whenever it actually happens and it clicks, I'm surprised. But if it clicks, then each one of these songs is going to feel natural by virtue of the fact that we're all getting after it together, you know? So I don't know. That's exactly what I wanted out of the situation. I mean, it was easy. It was easier because these guys had worked together, and like bass for Britton and drums for Will, like sort of a built-in rhythm section was awesome. And yeah, I was just like happily surprised the whole time I was there, honestly. And I leave everybody on every album. Like I want them to imagine that I believe in their strengths. And so I really kind of like just try to set it up as best I can, but really I say this before tour to touring band and stuff. I'm like, look, you got to make it your own. I don't want you to play it exactly the way it is on the song at all, you know. And so it's the same when I go into the studio with these guys. I want them to be like put their own stamp on the song, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, and have the freedom to kind of bring that to life.
Yeah, I'm not going to be like do this exactly. Not usually anyway.
Yeah. Well, maybe to walk it back a little bit, I wonder if there is a particular experience or moment in like the really early days when you were conceiving of the album that kind of made the entire project feel clear to you.
Oh yeah, like the one song, like on Only Run, there was a song called As Always, and I was like, this is what the record's gonna be, you know, something in this vein. Yeah, God, there must have been. It doesn't stand out as much as it did for that. But I think Thousand Oaks, that song might have been a sort of driving force, and it was based on an old song that I wrote like 20 years ago. That just kind of like it was friends of mine, I think, nicely told me that it was a good song back then, and I just thought it just drifted and there was no chorus, and so I just tore it down as I do a lot. But there was like some foundational aspects of it that seemed like worthwhile to pursue, and then I just tried a loop of variations, and then I watched a video of a woman who lost her son. I mean, I basically had a garbled vocal melody and sort of the skeleton of the song. And then I watched a video of this woman who lost her son in Thousand Oaks, and she was calling for gun control, and she said something along the lines of, "I don't want any more." She was like, you know, totally outraged, and as she should be, and she said, "I don't want any more thoughts and prayers. I want action on, you know, gun control." And then she stormed off, and that really affected me. And I've never, I don't know. I usually don't try to encounter songs like that, but that just made a big impact on me that I felt like I had to kind of touch on it a little bit. So that was probably the driving force. I wouldn't say that I tried to surround it with other songs that touched on, you know, political issues by any means, but there was a certain sense of, you know, anxiety to put it nicely, at that period, and like I don't know. And in my own life, I was going through certain personal struggles that I thought kind of correlated with the the macro struggles that the world was facing. So you know, snuck some of that in there too. I don't know. It's not a depressing record for anybody who hasn't, you know. But you know, it's grown up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in so many ways, like the personal things that happen to us are there is a kind of politic in there always. Like you can't always separate them, but
Yeah.
sometimes it takes like looking closely and at yourself and at the relationships that are close to you, and like if you can just spend some time um investigating that in and of itself is an act that can do a great deal.
Yeah. True. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. um you know, it's it's interesting because I wonder if you feel like this is the kind of album that you could have put out at any other point in your career, or you had to kind of get to this moment, get to this level of your understanding of yourself as an artist and as a musician to put together something that looks and sounds and feels like this and accomplishes what you wanted it to accomplish.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's a good, it kind of like follows the line of the albums in a certain way. Um, uh, you know, obviously each album is sort of a document of where you are, I think, at a given time. Even with some songs that might or might not be old or seem to have been, you know, thrown away. Like the third song is called Song for D, or no, sorry, it used to be. Now it's called D Forgiven, and now it's that was a song I wrote when I was like 20, and it fit with the whole feel of the rest of the album. That might have been one of the first songs we played. Do you guys remember? I mean, like, Mirror Song was one, but Song for D was pretty early, and I remember we discussed it, like, slowing it down to, like, almost, you know, this really, we wanted it to be almost plotting, and I was amazed that it came off as well as it did at that tempo. Anyway, so what was the question again? I think could I have written this at any other time? I mean, like the feel would have been different. You know, the players would have been different. It would have felt, you know, I probably wouldn't have made certain decisions regarding string quartets and whatnot. I probably just would have been lazy and done it on a Nord or something.
The reality of this recording is that it was in August in Texas, and it was 171 degrees every single day. And we ate the same diet of tacos and drank the same diet of tecates pretty much on the hour every single day. And when you do that for the course of 5 to 7 days in a row, it definitely affects a record, in my opinion. It affects the spirit of things.
And the tacos.
I mean, how could it not?
It's a bit of an experiment. It's a bit of a Ramble Creek experiment that happens from time to time, but it's necessary.
Yeah, definitely.
I also want to acknowledge the miracle of everybody's schedules lining up, because I manage Will, I manage Alec. I know how busy John is because I look at his Instagram and he's working 385 days a year. I know Britton is super busy. And when Alec and I were talking about having Will and Britton get involved, I'm like, let's see if we can make the deadline with those guys. And then that worked. And then the other miracle was John being available for a very short window of time that worked out perfectly. And then I couldn't believe it worked. I was so amazed that part of it worked. It was nuts because that never works. I mean, there's somebody that Alec was trying to work with for, you know, a while before, and we could never get the schedule to work. And so that's a miracle in indie rock now, to get the schedules to work. So if you see a collaboration anymore, you're like, everything had to work exactly right. And this was one of those cases where it worked out just right. So I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah.
Like Will happened to not be on tour, and Britton happened not to be doing stuff. Yeah, you're right. It was surprisingly easy. Everything kind of like fell into place for all of this. It was odd.
Yeah.
Eerie.
For John, Will, and Britton, I'm curious what was distinct about working on this project versus others that you've worked on in the past, and what was really rewarding about the experience as a whole.
Oh, goodness. You want to go, Britton? I just saw you unmute.
Oh, I'm just getting ready. You go first.
I have to say, I was thinking about it earlier today, and just listening to some of the, you know, coming in to contribute drums for this. I'm usually a bit of I'm definitely a field drummer. I'm not particularly technical, and so listen through just some of the demos, and of course some of the previous Clap records. Like there's some really phenomenal, specific, detailed drumming that occurs throughout those recordings, and even the demos kind of touched upon that. So speaking frankly, I was a little bit intimidated coming in, wondering if I could fill the bill just with detailed drumming and more up tempo and just time to get chops better because I'm not doing a ton of drumming these days. I'm more, hungered over a guitar and writing. So there was a slight bit of intimidation coming in, but like Alex said, within the first day or so, it felt like with the first two choices, the first two songs that we chose got us out of the gates on a really good note and made things pretty easy from that point on. And also I realized just personality wise that, as Alec mentioned, he said that, he kind of lets the musicians do their thing. And that to me meant a lot, to have a little bit of freedom to roam just a bit through the songs in a way that wasn't super compressed or airtight. But really it was a pleasant surprise just coming in and realizing after that first day and a half that the whole thing was going to fly. I felt very confident that it was all going to work. That's always the interesting thing about the first, say, 12 to 18 hours of a session, especially if you're dealing with a group that hasn't gotten together before, is just seeing how the personalities sort out. And it's always a joyous thing when you realize it's truly going to be a fun session. And that was realized right out of the gates pretty much.
Yeah, I echo there was an immediate trust, it felt like, and Alec did kind of let go of the reins a bit, and it didn't feel like puppet mastery, and we did kind of kick off from the get-go with a productive set of early sessions, and that it was a tight unit, whether it's 3 or 4 or 5 folks working together. I don't really like having an entourage and catering, a bunch of noise in the background. And it was just the 3 of us kind of hashing it out it was 4 days, and we took a day off and 4 days in that first set of sessions. And it was just very, very productive, 12-hour days. And then we'd go and have tacos and margaritas to finish each day. And it just felt like there was a methodology that really worked from start to finish. And it was just productive with not a lot of screwing around, aside from the conversational, rests and the, getting to know each other, but there wasn't a lot of messing about and wasted time. And I like those kind of sessions.
Yeah. For me, I mean, a lot of mix engineers, don't particularly like to have the artist around while they're dialing up their shit. I'm kind of the opposite. I like the physical connection, and I always prefer having, the artist there kind of all the time. And and Alec, showed up for the first day, and I felt like we hit it off pretty good. We talked about fatherhood and, other personal life stuff besides, making music. And he had the Philly and I had the New York thing, which is always a interesting dynamic, but it can be fun. But yeah. And once I said previously, once the songs started unraveling for me and I started mixing them and putting them together, like Alex talked about the strings, and you guys were talking about Mirror Song, and I wanted to ask you, Britton, because when I first put that song up, the sound of that piano sounded beautiful, like just beautiful. And is that like an old Steinway?
It's a Storian Clark that belongs to a buddy of mine named Roberto Sanchez.
Amazing.
There's 3 pianos plus a CP80 here. And the Storian Clark is not the nicest piano in the building, but it's definitely got a magic to it. And
it sounds magical.
That Alec gravitated towards. I think you played the U3 on the Yamaha U3 on one song. But most of the piano on the record is that old Story and Clark that belongs
That's
to
great.
Rob.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's got a thing.
That's great. Yeah, no, I was always struck by that. I still was. You know, I listened to the record yesterday driving around. Sorry, today driving my kid around just to filter them out, you know, just to like be like, all right, just leave me alone. And every time I hear that song, I'm like, that piano, God damn it. But the other thing I will say is, like, as we got more into the record, and you know, I realized at a certain point that I was not only listening to the record, I was feeling the record. Like, you don't feel every record that you work on. This record has it, just, you know, it's here and it's here, and that's pretty magical to be able to create that, as opposed to just create sonics, which obviously what we do. And I think that's what makes this record special. And I'll just say one more short thing about it is we finished mixing. We hadn't mastered yet, but then I do a traditional end of August Outer Banks, North Carolina, with another family who my daughter grew up with, the son. And that dad, Richard, is a huge Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah fan, huge. So when he heard I was doing it, he was so excited. He was texting me, what are the songs like? So one night, everybody went to bed. Me and him sat on this back porch with a little speaker, and I played him the record, and he was just so into it. And I felt so like, you know what I mean? It's just a great feeling. I mean, I loved it anyway, but to have my good buddy Richard just be totally like, John, this is incredible. It just made me feel great. I mean, it was wonderful.
Yeah. When I was listening, I found that there is something very physical about the act of listening to the record, something that just like wants to twist inside your stomach, because it feels like those experiences and your voice is kind of right there, and that you're having a front row seat to it. It's cathartic to listen to. It feels like you're getting out these sounds and these emotions that I think a lot of people stuff down, and that is rare in any event. You know, Alec, for you, I think you've been really devoted to ensuring that the Clap Your Hands Say Yeah project remain firmly and pretty fiercely independent. And I wonder what that's enabled you to accomplish creatively and in terms of the albums that you've put out.
Well, I mean, I can only kind of speculate as to like what other friends have told me. I mean, I definitely don't feel much pressure to make any particular kind of record. Like I'll go into any given album and I'll make what I want to make. I won't try to, like the first Clap Your Hands album, people seem to like, and then on the second one, I wasn't gonna make Clap Your Hands Say Yeah revisited or anything like that, and I pretty firmly, clearly showed people that I was not gonna do the same thing over and over again at that time. I mean, yeah, might have lost some fans along the way as a result, but that happens. But I think that gives me the freedom to work with Will and Britton if I want to, and John. You know, nobody's going to tell me like you got to work with this person because, you know, I don't know, because we need to have it sound this particular way, you know. So yeah, it gives me a bit of freedom. I will say, kind of going back to the way this album feels, and something that Will touched on, and those guys working together. The perspective of a drummer who's also a songwriter has always been kind of important to me. I've played with some really good drummers. Like the closest I can say to the idea of getting together as a unit and trying to hit the ground running was that Mo Beauty record, where I had George Porter on bass and Stanton Moore on drums. And Stanton, everybody in the drumming world knows, is a great drummer, but and I thought he did a great job on this record, don't get me wrong, but I feel like Sean, who was the first Clap Your Hands drummer, Sean Greenhall, he was initially a guitarist and a songwriter, and I feel like that gives you a little bit more perspective in terms of when to let go, you know, how to fit your fill into a given area. You know, just because it sounds cool to you doesn't necessarily make it sound cool to the overall thing. I didn't obviously stand such a pro. I didn't actually need to you know, I don't need to teach him any of this shit, but it sort of, I thought the feel of this record, everybody just felt comfortable and loosening any reins and just trusting that, like, these guys have already made a lot of really great records, you know, themselves. They can do what they want. It kind of opened the whole thing up. So I think that's kind of what John's referring to as well. Like, you feel this one, and it's not just me, you know, it's everybody there. So
Yeah, that's incredible. I appreciate you illuminating it like that and explaining it like that.
yeah, it's
Um,
for people just to be like natural going in and
Mhm.
show their own personality. I mean, I used to say this to other musicians that I play with. I was like, there's a reason I know Carlos Alomar, you know, for on the Bowie records, and it's or there's a reason why I know Mike Garson, for example, on some of the Bowie records, who anyway, and it's because like they define themselves. They define themselves in the context of somebody else's projects. But you gotta,
Mm,
yeah, it's because their personalities come off, you know.
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
otherwise it's dull.
Mhm.
Like do this, do that, you know, whatever.
And well, I just want to be mindful of your time. Are we getting up against
I asked Christoph how long this was gonna be, and he's like 55 minutes. Oh, all right. It's
Yeah,
just-
Christoph is very precise. Thankfully, thankfully.
right on the dot?
Yeah,
I can hang a couple minutes
helped-
longer. But, you know,
Okay.
I need whatever. We've got drum lessons, and you know, it's all music and oriented, so it's a good excuse. But still, I was going to add a little bit to what Alec was saying a moment ago, and that sometimes, just through personal experience, I'll get called on to produce or co-produce records, and the term producer anymore to my eye and to my ear is just it's hard to define, and the whole thing frankly it gets a little bit of an eye roll, because going back to what Alec said, once we all got in there, and on most any session that I work on, once everybody's in there and kind of getting their fingerprints on a song, and particularly if the songwriter is generous and trusting enough to give everyone their freedom to make the song kind of together, well, then in my mind and in my definition, everyone is at that point producing the record. And it was inevitable and a wonderful feeling, going back to even what I mentioned earlier. Once we kind of got going with the first song or two, and with all the ideas and inherent ability within the room, everybody was producing. So I just think that is often the case when you're dealing with a high caliber of musicians that that harbor the necessary amount of trust for each other to make a project go. Everybody is producing once you get through that first song in so many occurrences.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, it's interesting that things kind of come together as a result of that sort of groupthink dynamic. And I think, you know, Alec, throughout your career, there have been all of these fantastic examples of the ways that you've blended collaboration and community to really root these projects in something that feel like it's touching a number of different people, whether it's when you set up shop in New Orleans after Katrina and worked with some of the artists there, or sourced relationship stories and kind of figured out how that could fit together. I mean, what role does community and collaboration and leaving yourself open to that play to play in, you know, the way that you understand the Clap Your Hands Say Yeah project?
I mean, it's what Will said is exactly right. To me, it should be collaborative. I do feel like, and I also say this to a lot of people. I mean, like working with these guys, I didn't really have to say very much. Everybody's secure enough and has done enough work that you're not trying to sort of be extravagant on a given track just for the sake of sort of look at me. You know, sometimes I'll listen to music and I'll be like, all right, well, that guy's a good guitarist, but that doesn't make any sense context of this song. So we've all made enough records at this point that we're not trying to, like, you know, make our stamp in any given way, like by trying too hard, in other words. And no, collaboration is the purpose. Like, to bring it back to the very beginning, I picked these people for this particular album with the hope that we'd be able to kind of like make it feel the way it does. And you know, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it's a struggle, and I've definitely been 3 weeks into an album thinking, I don't know of any of this. Well, that's an exaggeration, but like a lot of this doesn't seem to work, or there's no actual, you know, direction for this. Whereas what these guys were saying, yeah, within the first couple of days, we knew that we had something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
it wasn't just me, yeah, by any means.
You know, maybe to wrap things up, because I'm keeping an eye on a very precise time allotment for this conversation, I would love to kind of go around and hear from everyone. I mean, what do you think is the ideal, or at least the ideal that you picture in your head, environment to listen to the album? How do you want people to listen to it? Can start anywhere, or I can.
How do I want people, like CD or Vine? No.
Cassette, or just like, you know, that, you know, what does that space look like? Is it an intimate listening experience to you? Are you like looking to perform it live and get that sort of?
Like in the back. Yeah, I used to get this like in the back of a bar. Like I actually remember somebody saying, you know, these songs are good, but what is it going to be like when it's played in a bar in the background somewhere? I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what it's. I mean, not for this album. This was years ago, when we were trying to stay in the spotlight. No, I think you know, for me, I listen to records through headphones. I usually kind of take a walk and I'll listen to it over and over and over again. I mean, for different reasons. Like, I was just listening to Elliott Smith's record because I'm doing some I'm trying to use some of his ideas, and Nebraska, Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska, over and over and over again, you know. But usually I listen to be informed about, you know, certain moves of mine. I think as just an average fan, yeah, I would wander with headphones. That's what I'd do. And they can feel it however they like.
I agree. Part of the key is repeated listens. You know, I tend to, if I like something on the first listen, I might not like it for very long, but often it's the things that it takes 3 or 4. I kind of think 7 listens is the magic number of times to listen to a record before you know anything about whether you like it or it's good in your mind. And regardless of the format or the speakers or headphones, I think repeated listens are the key to knowing anything about what the artist is trying to convey. And it's in this playlist world that we live in, it's frustrating to me that the way people ingest music now, it's weird and impersonal, and it rarely gets a good big picture, you know, of what the artist was trying to do. So I'd say repeated listens is the way to go.
I fully agree. I think repeated listens in a concentrated environment. I was having a conversation with someone not so long ago, and this goes back to a really old conversation, but about how maybe record reviews should not be allowed to come out until 6 months after the record has been released, because it often takes that much time for an individual to truly realize what a record might or might not mean to them. Of course, that's not the way it works with press and with timing and with strategy and such. But sometimes I don't think we realize it until far down the line what a record can really mean. And sometimes I think a switch can flip and it can change the way that you embody it. spiritually. And so with this particular record, I found it to be a particularly good driving record. I listened to it a lot on tours when they used to happen, and to listen to have that first listen at the master on tour is one of those listens that I won't ever forget. I'll kind of remember where I was and what the sun was kind of hanging like that day in the sky. But the car often provides a necessary and concentrated environment for making sense of a record, I've found.
Yeah, all records are created different. But this record, first of all, I think this is a record to listen to top to bottom because the sequence is so fantastic. And, there are songs that crossfade into each other, which I think is a really underutilized thing these days. Whereas, in the 80s, they did that a lot, in the 90s. But I also, knowing this record like I know it, I feel like on a plane with headphones, with gummies and a glass of red wine is how I would say the most optimum way to listen to this record would be. And I can't wait to fly to Toronto or Spain, because I'm going to figure that shit out, because it really is immersive. I said it again, you feel it, but it's all around you. And the songs that have the great drum, driving drums are really powerful, but then the open songs with the strings are really beautiful. It's something that it's like a journey. And I mean, that sounds cliche, but it's not. It really is. The record does take you many different places. And then the defining factor, which glues everything together, is Alex's voice, and it just soars over everything. And then lyrically, it just pulls you in. So that's how I'd advise it. I wouldn't do gummies and red wine, while driving. Just so you know. I mean, I wouldn't do that. But if you're in a plane, please.
With somebody else in the driver's seat.
Uber. Will's going to start Ubering around Austin.
I'm going on a work trip. I'll be back
in an hour.
I have to go. I have to surrender this laptop. Thank you guys so much for having me along.
Good seeing you, Will.
Bye. Yeah, I think that is also part of our cue to wrap things up. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for sharing in a way that was so candid and open-hearted. I think this really gave everybody a good look into what went on behind the scenes, and really at the root of this record, which is always a really special and important experience.
Yeah, thanks a lot for doing this, Melissa, and thanks guys for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for being available and hanging out with us. It's good to see everybody's faces again.
Exactly. Well, thank you for once again asking me to be a part of the team. It really, the Britton and Will and you did amazing work, and then you brought it to me, and it was really just a pleasure, to get to know you and to mix the record. So win-win for me.
Do it again.
It came out great. You did a fantastic job.
And thank you, Melissa, for doing this. It was really great meeting you.
You as well. Hopefully one day we can meet in the flesh.
I want to come up there again and make, I love working up there. It's just so great. So, yeah.
And John, by the way, Illinois is a legal weed state now, so you can come here too.
No, I know. I just drove from Raleigh to Minnesota to work at Pachyderm. So I crossed through.
Nice.
And I'm impressed, by the way.
Yeah, it's been a good thing. It was perfect timing for me this year. So.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, no, amazing.
Yeah.
So
right on.
I'm in.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, Christoph, if you're feeling good, if you want to give us a nudge, wink, wink, or.
We should also. I also want to introduce Christoph. Christoph is the co-manager of Clap Your Hands with me, and he's been an incredible partner throughout this record and the record cycle. And he's a big part of how this came together today. So thank you, Christoph, very much. You've been an incredible help.
Thank you, Christoph. Great meeting you too.
Yeah,
Thanks for your time and all the best from Palermo.
very good to just.
Wait, you're in Italy?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm down in Sicily.
I'm
In the
Sicilian
heart of the
100%.
Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Well, I figured from your surname.
Christoph
Don't-
Christoph, I always feel like he's working 3 times harder. He's a German guy who lives in Italy, who is managing an American band.
That
So
is
yeah.
the hat trick of insanity right there.
Yeah, so he's 3 times smarter than everybody else.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
great. I love him.
Yeah, I'm used to emergency by now, so I think I can handle that stuff.
Right, right.
All right,
Amazing.
thanks everybody.
Thank you guys. Good seeing you.
It's
Yeah,
good to see
thank you.
We'll reconnect.
All right.
Cheers.
Well, take care, guys.
Take care. Have a great night.
Bye.